Ever get that weird feeling that the qualities that make a great leader are shifting? Like, are we seeing more and more people in charge who are, to put it nicely, a little rough around the edges?
Right.
Uh-huh.
So, today's deep dive, buckle up, because we're talking about something a bit unsettling. The idea that psychopathic tendencies, yeah, you heard that right, might actually be on the rise, especially in leadership positions.
It's a fascinating topic. It's easy to jump to conclusions, right?
Oh, totally.
But we need to be careful about throwing the word psychopath around. We're not talking Hannibal Lecter here.
Exactly.
It's more about specific personality traits, like a lack of empathy, a focus on personal gain, and sometimes a knack for manipulating others to get what they want.
So it's less about a clinical diagnosis and more about traits that, even in smaller doses, are pretty alarming, especially when the people who hold power over us exhibit them. And that brings us to Ronson. He wrote the psychopath test. In an interview we're looking at, he doesn't hold back. He straight up calls Elon Musk, get this, the epitome of despicability.
Wow, strong words.
Right. What's interesting is that Ronson isn't just talking about Musk as a person. He draws a line between Musk's behavior and the state of Twitter, or X, as it's now called. Ronson argues that the whole platform has become a breeding ground for toxicity, and Musk's leadership is a big part of that.
Yeah, it's not just about the name change.
Exactly. The whole vibe has changed dramatically.
And Ronson's most compelling point is about truth, or the lack of it. Empathy, too. He argues Musk seems to value his own version of reality over actual facts. And any criticism, it's just noise to him.
That's where the whole psychopathy thing starts to feel a little too real.
Right. A key hallmark of psychopathy is a lack of remorse or empathy.
It's like they don't get it.
It's not just that they don't get it, they don't care.
Wow.
And when someone with those tendencies holds real power, it's a recipe for disaster.
It can get ugly fast.
Exactly. And Ronson argues that these traits aren't just confined to Silicon Valley. They're becoming more common in leaders across the board. Are we rethinking what good leadership even looks like?
That's the million-dollar question. Are we, as a society, starting to accept traits that would have been career-ending in the past as just part of the new normal?
Ronson points to the rise of authoritarianism as a major red flag.
Okay, for those who missed Political Science 101, what exactly is authoritarianism, and why should we care?
In short, authoritarianism is about strong central power, with less regard for individual freedoms.
So the opposite of democracy.
Exactly, and it's troubling because we're seeing a trend towards authoritarianism globally.
Wait, are we really becoming less free? Sounds like a bad sci-fi movie.
It's not that simple, but there are definite red flags. The 2024 Bertelsmann Foundation report painted a bleak picture. For the first time in a long time, there are more autocracies than democracies worldwide.
Whoa, those stats are intense. It makes you think about that old saying, power corrupts. Maybe it's not just a saying, but how does authoritarianism play out in the real world?
That's the thing. It's easy to think of it as something from a history book, but Ronson's point is that we see signs of it much closer to home, especially after recent events.
You mean like the pandemic?
Exactly. During the pandemic, governments around the world suddenly had emergency powers. In some cases, that was necessary, but it also opened the door for leaders to grab more power. I remember those early days. Everything felt so chaotic.
In that chaos, people look for a leader who says, don't worry, I've got this, even if it means giving up some freedoms.
Safety over freedom, right?
Exactly. And all the misinformation and propaganda flying around made it worse, making it easier for authoritarian ideas to take hold.
Never let a good crisis go to waste, right? But this isn't just a thought experiment.
This ties into climate change, the biggest issue of our time.
Yep, climate change is the ultimate test. Can the world work together to fix it? But here's the bigger question. Can a world that's getting more comfortable with authoritarianism actually come together to solve this crisis?
Now that's the kind of question that keeps you up at night. On the one hand, you could argue that climate change is so huge that it affects everyone. Maybe it'll force us to work together.
That's the hope. There are historical examples like World War II, where countries with different ideologies came together to fight a common enemy.
Okay, I can get behind a bit of optimism, but there's also the flip side. What if these psychopathic tendencies make it harder to deal with climate change?
That's the big unknown. Dealing with climate change requires empathy, long-term thinking, and cooperation, which aren't the hallmarks of authoritarian leaders.
So, are we stuck? We need the exact qualities that seem to be disappearing to fix the biggest problem ever. What do we do?
That's where things get interesting.
Into this whole mix, we add another ingredient, artificial intelligence, specifically generative AI.
You'll have to break this AI thing down for us. Every day there's a new headline. Is it saving the world or destroying it?
AI is everywhere now, and generative AI is where things get super interesting. GII can create, learn, and solve problems in ways we used to think only humans could. That has enormous implications for climate change.
So how does GII factor into climate change? Will it help or complicate things?
Like any powerful tool, it can do both. Imagine using AI to process massive amounts of climate data, identifying patterns and predicting trends with incredible accuracy.
So like a super weatherman who can see into the future.
Exactly. It could help us model climate scenarios, test out solutions, and identify the most impactful actions we can take to avoid the worst outcomes.
That sounds promising, but you mentioned there are downsides. What's the catch?
The fear is that GII could be used to help authoritarian regimes stay in power. Imagine AI-powered systems tracking and silencing environmental activists, or creating propaganda to deepen climate change divisions.
So, it's like we're on a seesaw. It could help or hurt us depending on who controls it.
Exactly. And that's why this conversation is so important. We're deciding the future of AI right now. So what can we do? It feels so big.
It is, but we're not powerless. The more people understand GAI, the better. We need to demand transparency from companies and accountability from leaders. Ethics can't be an afterthought. It has to be built into AI from the start.
So it's not just about the tech, it's about how we use it, making sure AI works for us, not the other way around.
100%. This has to be a global effort. We need these conversations everywhere, with everyone, to ensure that GAI is used to fix the planet, not to break it more.
It's a lot to unpack. As we wrap up, I keep thinking about that question. Are we seeing more psychopathic tendencies in our leaders? And what does that mean for the future? Not just with climate change, but with AI too.
That's the question. The choices we make, the leaders we choose, they'll determine whether GAI helps or hurts us in the long run.
It's a lot, but also empowering. We can do something about this. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Here's a final thought. As you see all this new AI tech, be curious, ask questions, and remember, you have a voice in all of this. Don't be afraid to use it.